every time something's built in California, it goes through this evaluation process. So it's like you're taking a project, like I'm interested in housing, right? So it's like I'm seeing how this is happening, who's paying for it? How do we evaluate how it's going to affect the population or the water or the energy use? What species are going to be impacted? All these things, and it gives the public a platform with which to, comment on and evaluate.
That was musician and activist Patrick O'Malley. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. Every week on this podcast, you'll hear from musicians, bartenders, photographers, and San Franciscans from all walks of life, telling stories, sharing personal histories, and trying to put into words what makes this city so special. Welcome to episode 37, part 2. In part 1, Patrick talked about his arrival in San Francisco and his political awakening here. In this episode, he spends the first half of the podcast talking about politics, with an especially deep dive into housing, both in the city and statewide, and his own public transportation advocacy. In the second half, he talks about his music, which you can find if you search for Patrick O'Malley. And if you stick around after the outro of this episode, you'll hear a sample of his music. Here's Patrick.
So then I decided it doesn't take you long, getting up at 4 a.m. to realize maybe I should go back to school. But at least why I had this opportunity. So I did go back to state, but I decided when I went to state that I didn't want to do music as my major. I wanted to try something else. So I looked into anthropology and social science and various other things that I felt tallied with my interests at the time. And I wound up in the humanities department. And it was funny, my general sense of how these disciplines separated was not strong at the time. The difference between philosophy and humanities and all these things was not like...
Were you of a, that sounds cool? Because that was me.
More or less, yeah. I mean, to be honest, it was kind of, I looked at classes and, that sounds interesting. And so I ended up taking a class, which was this when I first went back to school, which was so above my abilities at the time. And it was called Derrida and the Jewish Tradition. And it was taught by Dr. Sandra Luft, who is brilliant and had a huge influence on my life. So I go to this class, and it's like, there's maybe 10 of us. Half of them are like doctors who are taking this, people who are retired and are taking this just, for intellectual stimulation. I haven't the slightest idea of half the words people are using in this class. But this guy, so Derrida, this is the heyday of postmodernism, and he was a very controversial figure in a lot of ways. And so this guy in this class, she's lecturing on, objectivity and various other things. And this kid who was probably my age, slams this book down and says, so you're saying, this, and you're saying blah, 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 relativity, and you're saying, and he's furious. And he takes his books and gets up and leaves. And Dr. Luft is just super cool. And she just kind of smiles and she's like, yeah, that happens from time to time.
That's what lets her know that her class is effective.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's awesome. I'm totally sticking with this.
Totally.
But
fun.
Yeah, it was tough. I audio recorded every lecture she did, and I really worked at that material because catching up to where that was, and it was a very tough class for me, but I learned so much within those. I took a number of classes with her. So in the humanities program, I took, so the Derrida class, I took postmodern criticism, Nietzsche, Heidegger. So a lot of pretty dense authors. Mm-hmm. And it was great. And I remember, just so many ways that changed, my way of thinking. And it cleared out, I didn't stay married to postmodernism forever, but what it did in sort of making me understand the way that people use language was key.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when we're arguing about stuff, we're arguing about words.
Sounds like you were really getting into critical thinking and learning what that means in different types of approaches.
Absolutely. And, I thought for a while that was kind of the route that I wanted to go, that I would like to be a, philosophy professor or a, critical theory professor. And there's a lot of I got a lot from it, but it did it leads you to this problem that I think we're in, for a lot of us who came out of culture. You end up spending a lot of time arguing about culture and not time arguing about like power and money, property, these kind of things. So I didn't want to stay within that academic mold. I wanted something, and I wasn't really sure where that would lead me or even what the direction was. I thought that I would go into law, and keep in mind, I'm still like interested in, I'm still writing songs and stuff, but I had to figure out something to do during the day. So I was working I went to work at First Republic Bank. I was there for about 5 years, and I met a lot of good friends. And I worked at the loan desk, like after lunch, and people would drop off their mortgage payments or whatever. So I had a lot of time to read stuff and to write lyrics. So like the first like full album I did in San Francisco, I basically wrote all those lyrics sitting
From
at
the loan desk.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Just probably why there's a little of that in some of those songs. But yeah, I was still, so I wanted to do music. I couldn't figure out how to make a living out of that. So what am I going to do that's going to make a difference during the day? So yeah, I thought about law school. I ended up doing some paralegal classes, and I did eventually get a job for a little while at a law firm.
Oh, okay.
But
doing what type? Paralegal
they were
stuff?
doing election campaign finance stuff. So basically, they handled donations for donors. They would evaluate the laws on how much people were within, their spending limits and that sort of thing, and deal with those campaign finance laws. And really, the one thing I learned from being there was that I did not want to be at a law firm.
Right. Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. So that was not my route. I left after that job. I ended up working at where I work today, which is I do environmental consulting, and which is, for someone like me, is just an amazing career, because every time something's built in California, it goes through this evaluation process. So it's like you're taking a project, like I'm interested in housing, right? So it's like I'm seeing how this is happening, who's paying for it? How do we evaluate how it's going to affect the population or the water or the energy use? What species are going to be impacted? All these things, and it gives the public a platform with which to, comment on and evaluate different projects. So it's been great, and I've learned a ton, and that's where I've been working for my day job, pretty much
for a while. How long?
10 years at this point.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any behind the scenes of how, especially with housing and other types of development, like how laws are rewritten or navigated or
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the big debates around housing in California right now is this idea that it's all about zoning. And as somebody who was very interested in new urbanism and that kind of stuff, like I definitely, I read all those books when I was getting interested in this stuff, and how, different sections of cities are, cut off for single family housing and for this. And so I was definitely aware to the ideas of zoning. How it's been misused now in California is that the idea that the problem with housing is that zoning has prevented housing. And so one of the things that you do get to see in the type of work I do is who pays for housing, who buys housing, and who lives in housing. And part of this conversation that people aren't having is that cities don't create housing. Developers create housing. All cities can do is change the criteria around which housing is built. And when you do that, you're essentially giving money or wealth. You have a piece of property. If you can build higher on that piece of property, you're endowing that piece of property with more wealth. Right? So that's all that cities can do.
This acre versus this acre.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
one that builds more and higher is worth more money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, if you're a developer, you want to build as high as you possibly can and sell it for as much as you possibly can.
Especially in a very dense and defined, like there's no expanding San Francisco.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Horizontally.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah, it can only go up. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that, what gets built does not, if developers want to get as much as they can, And the investors who back it, including pension funds in a lot of cases, want to get the highest return, which means that they're going to build it to sell at the highest rate, which means that the only people who can own or use that property are people who can afford those rates. So other cities who have tried the just let people build model, like New York, was a disaster. So they built the 80-20s, basically 20% affordable, 80% market. And, so the result is New York has got a glut of market rate property that they can't hold tenants onto, and a massive shortage of affordable housing. Vancouver has been building to keep up with the rate of population, but the prices keep going up. So what people are not getting is that the cost of housing is not a matter of supply and demand.
Does San Francisco have a housing shortage?
So that's an interesting question. I've read anywhere between that there's 30,000 to 60,000 vacant units. So
does that include pied-à-terres, Airbnb, or
yeah,
okay,
yeah. So that's including that. So like when you start breaking it down, it's like, are there more people than there are property? And housing doesn't work as a supply and demand issue, because you can always own more housing than you can use. So nationally, we have 5 vacant houses for every single homeless person. So we have a glut of housing. After 2008, when those mortgages went under, big private equity firms bought up those properties, turned many of them into Airbnb or Zeus or all these other things that you and I haven't heard of, but are a similar model. And as far as properties being sold to individuals or families, that's at an all-time low. So we're moving to a model where, a handful of wealth management firms own the majority of the property. And, if you make your money off of owning property, you're going to push towards laws that are going to allow more stuff to be built, right?
And around here, I keep seeing Maven. I keep seeing a couple of it. Are these at least maybe like fronts for the big... or like whatever companies.
Some of them are property management firms.
Got it.
So the people who are managing the property are often different than the people who own it. So,
and it's just 2 or 3 names that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
On all the properties.
Yeah. And in other Bay Area cities, it's similar. The gentrification argument is not, well, a lot of people want to live here and a lot of people are going to move away because that's not what's happening. What's happening is when interest rates are zero, big money. Real estate is it's a global business. They're buying up farmland. They're buying up big swaths of city. They're buying up huge parts of Africa. Interest rates are zero. Money flows into assets, which is, property, stocks, whatever. And so they're buying that up. That's what's driving the costs up. So like what cities need to do instead of, building more is they need to start acquiring properties, which San Francisco is starting to do now, which is good. Create community land trusts, so you keep property permanently affordable, and create cooperatives and social housing. So the ILWU created a number of cooperatives in San Francisco back in like the 30s and 40s. That's an excellent model. So that's what cities need to be doing rather than just because you're going to build big empty cities. And if you go and look at Dogpatch and some of these other places, big empty buildings. Mm-hmm. So I got involved in kind of public transportation advocacy, I don't know, probably about 8 years ago, when I noticed that much of what our public infrastructure, a whole lot of it was being given away to private corporations. And it started with the Google bus situation. So when they call them shuttle buses, I guess. When that was started, they didn't go through environmental review at all. And there was a hearing about that, and which is absurd when you think of like if a bike path goes through environmental review, giant buses burning diesel going back and forth all day, that should probably be covered by that. But it wasn't. So that program was created by a business advocacy group, which includes, big healthcare companies, big tech companies, big real estate. And they basically figured out a way that if you create a busing program that is only for the extremely wealthy, you are not only going to remove certain parts of your population, but you are going to massively increase property values. If you're a property owner, that's something that you want. So basically, Spur started off during the era of urban renewal. And about 1968, they created a document called a call to action. And a call to action says that if San Francisco is going to compete with other big international cities for business, and this is, I'm almost quoting verbatimly, its population is going to have to be more white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And they say that the way to do that is to change the quality of housing, jobs, education, various other things. So it was a population selection, and the shuttle bus program continues on that. So like we were talking about earlier with Willie Brown saying, I want Main Street to compete with 3rd Street. That's part of that vision. So big parts of the city, including the African-American population who have, felt the brunt of this, were largely the victims of these programs. So anyway, I got involved in transit advocacy when I started seeing this happen with giving away parking spots to Avis Rent-A-Car for the car share program. And there's nothing wrong with car share, but it needs to be run in a way that is equitable and it's not giving away public property to one of the largest private rent-a-car companies. So the city had done some studies, and they found that the people who are using these car shares are, massively higher economic demographic. The city started pushing something called, emerging mobilities. So I forgot the full name of the program, but basically all these things that provide transportation options pretty much only to wealthy people. And you see these expanding. So Chariot, when Chariot happened, Chariot was a private bus system that did not take school kids, did not take senior citizens, did not take people in wheelchairs, and charged 3 times as much as a Muni fare, and then ran in the same routes that Muni ran. So, essentially a Jim Crow bus system. So I got involved trying to fight that permit program. So I would, appear at city council hearings. I organized email campaigns. I wrote some op-eds. And that kind of woke me up to what the city was doing and trying to take away our transit.
And that's before Uber and Lyft.
Around the same time.
Or around when they were getting started.
But the ultimate goal of these companies is they know that car ownership is decreasing. What they want to, and as you see, if you live in the city, these cars driving around and are mapping the city for automated vehicles. So they know that as automated vehicles are coming, they just want to make sure that that's out of public hands and in the hands of a private transportation company that can charge whatever rates, exclude whatever people they want.
Monopolies.
Exactly.
For those reading at home.
Yeah. And so, if you've seen these struggles that cities have gone through for the last 200 years, it's been trying to get things out of the company town model. And new urbanism, neoliberalism has pushed us back into the company town model. So I'm happy to see people finally waking up to that, and that paying $6 more to ride on a segregated bus does nothing for traffic and does, nothing for our equity as a city.
And rideshare does the opposite for traffic. It makes it made it worse.
Yeah, exactly. And rideshare has taken people who, there's a lot of new residents in San Francisco who public transportation is a frightening thing for them. And they would rather dial up a car. But under the medallion system with taxis, at least people could hail a taxi and the city could regulate how many cars were on the road. The ride shares went out of their way to go to Sacramento and get laws that basically, stopped cities from making those choices. So if you've got, if you take 30% or whatever it is that they take off the top of every ride, and you don't have to pay for anybody's vehicle, or, then they just flood the cities with cars, which is exactly what they've done.
Let's get back to music.
Yeah.
Your music.
Yes. So the first, so I formed a band called The Meek, which started out as kind of an acoustic 3-piece, and sort of very much along the lines of the band that I had with Josh and Chris in Santa Barbara. Me on acoustic guitar, a bass player, and a guitar player. And the acoustic acting is kind of a snare drum sort of rhythm. And the songs were very, I don't know, if you imagine like Ralph Nader meets Jacques Brel.
Oh, easy.
Yeah. So clearly, I mean, destined for stardom, right? And, they dealt with like, issues of anonymity and loneliness and, housing.
Right. Emo political.
More or less, yeah. But, in a different route. I mean, it was definitely, I look at a lot of those songs and there was definitely some more personal stuff, but they're also very impersonal in ways. But yeah, so the Meek, we did an EP, and then we got a friend of ours to do drums, and we kind of turned it more towards a rock band kind of thing. And that's when we did A Whole Different Country, which was my first kind of full length album, which was, I don't know, probably recorded in like 4 days or something like that. Yeah, super fun.
In studio or at a house?
In a studio, Eric Walker's studio in Bernal Heights. So, yeah, and I've worked with him for years. He's an amazing musician and incredibly talented. I remember recording that though. Like my ear has grown a lot through recording. Sure. And like, he would be like, oh, what do you think about this reverb on the vocals? And I'm like, oh, that sounds great. In my mind, I'm like, what the hell is reverb? What about this tail? Do you think that fades too? Yeah. What am I talking about? Like,
but now you know.
But now I know.
Doing. Yeah.
But you do what a lot of bands do is or many bands, or kind of along my mind, you go into the studio and you're like, I just want our live sound. Yeah. And then you record it. Then you go like, it kind of sounds like us live.
Yeah.
So it took a little while for me to learn, like, yeah, studio is not like, that's not how it works.
There's things you can do.
There's things you could do. And like, so from that point on, it was kind of like, yeah, get a good engineer and kind of listen to what they say. And, I'll do the things I do and let them do the things they do.
It's their art.
Exactly.
Yeah. When would this, was it A Whole Different Country?
A Whole Different Country, yeah.
And when would this have been?
A Whole Different Country was 2003. Oh, okay. I think, yeah.
Okay.
So there's definitely some of the political aspects creep out in that album. There's a lot of sort of Bush era references in there that, yeah. So that we did a number of shows promoting that, and played at Amoeba and Bottom of the Hill, and we never took it nationally. We never toured or anything like that. But yeah, I was pretty happy with that album.
That's this is still the Meek.
This is still the Meek.
Okay.
And then, so as we kind of moved more in towards, kind of trying to be a straight up rock band, we went through a number of name changes, and we were the Drones Club for a while, which is a P.G. Woodhouse reference. It's a bad idea. I should never name things. Yeah. And then we ended up being Trust. And so we did another album as Trust, which was more of a straight up rock album. And that was also recorded here in San Francisco. Yeah. And then after that, we worked together, I think, about 10 years at that point.
Oh, wow.
And then we kind of went our separate ways, and I ended up doing some more solo stuff. Yeah, so the immediate album after the Trust album, I wanted to get away from guitars and get away from the kind of me as a singer-songwriter. And so I worked with this guy, Brian Hudgens, who did production. So I just basically, he would come over here, I'd give him a song, and it's like, okay, here's a song, now take me out of it. And I'll show up later and I will sing. So like
Interesting.
And it ended up being a great combination, like helped me hear the songs in a different way. Right. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So when would that have been?
I think that was 2011.
Okay.
Yeah. So we did an album called Looking Over.
And what was the name?
Patrick O'Malley.
That was Patrick O'Malley.
Yeah, okay. So when I went solo, it became Patrick O'Malley. So O'Malley is the original form of, when the Irish came over, a lot of them changed their name, just like a lot of immigrants did. So it was originally O'Malley and became Maley. I don't know why they thought that sounded less Irish, but, that's...
Rhyme with daily. Yeah, interesting.
But yeah, so I went back to that. I have a cousin who lives in Sweden, and he's a novelist and screenwriter, and I was talking to him about names, and he's like, because he's had the original form of the name, and he's like, yeah, no one can remember it, and it's hard
No one
to
can remember
pronounce.
O'Malley?
No one can remember Maley.
Maley, right.
O'Malley is a lot easier for
Yeah.
people to. It stays in people's mind, and I would get Maley, Malay. So it seemed like a logical thing to kind of go back to that name, and that's what I've used since.
Okay. And so now, since that time of going to Patrick O'Malley, has it been, is that how you've been performing and recording and writing and everything since then? So about 8 or 9 years or so?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. Okay. And what other kind of stuff have you done, and where can people find your music?
So, my last album is released by Bottom Feeder Records, which is out of here in San Francisco, so it can be found at bottomfeeder.com. You can also just Google Patrick O'Malley. So the last album is called Welcome to the End of the Empire, and it was great. It was more of a straight-up rock album.
What are you talking about? You shouldn't name things. That's a great name.
Yeah, 1 out of 5, But so this last album, I think I got a great drummer, and we just kind of really made sort of the rock album I wanted to make. And then I spent probably as much time as I spent recording the album, writing the 20-page political essay, which is on the inside. So if you buy the actual album, and you can contact Bottom Feeder for that, then you get all that wisdom.
Which you can write prose, you just can't name things.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah, it's like, why say something in one word when you can use 700, right?
That was Patrick O'Malley. Check back next week when we'll hear from motivational speaker Uncle Damien. Music for the podcast is by Otis MacDonald. Film photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. Find all 80-plus episodes on our website, storiedsf.com. And while you're there, you can also help support this project by going to our store page and checking out the different pledge levels. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date on everything we do. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the show for us. And if you have ideas of who should be on the show, our email is storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.
So I'll play you something from the 2003 Meek album. This one's called The Contractor's Wife. The laughter that would finish in a coughing fit, the embers from the cigarette she always lit, before the slow parade of after-dinner drinks began, a porch light serenade, perhaps some uninvited friend did burn. As the pages of a novel turn, this life, another dinner with a contractor's wife. How seamlessly tomorrow blends with yesterday. You soon as meet the neighbors as they moved away, with hanging plants to water and a game that's always on. Less reason to be bothered when you're watering your lawn. It passed, dropping ice into a whiskey glass. This life, another dinner with a contractor's wife. Announce the final winner on the radio today. You said yourself you thought it could be you. If you found the numbers matched, what would it do for you? The sun is always shining there at 4 o'clock. They're pulling into driveways all around the block, with mail to be opened and some things to throw away. Both of us have spoken now, there's nothing left to say, so she will mix another drink for me. This life, another dinner with the contractor's wife.